Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Hello and welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. Well, friends, we're back already again. We felt that we owed you another episode after that long break, and that's before we drift off into the summer vacation here. So here we are. Today we have Peter Voss-Knude on the show, which was a real honor. It was recorded live at Overgaden together with the director there, Merete Jankowski. She's also been a guest on this program back on episode number 75. In case you don't know it, Overgaden is a really fantastic exhibition space here in Copenhagen, and you can see Peter's show, which is up there, called Peter and the Danish Defense, and it's up until the 6th of August. I would suggest that you do that because the show is quite engaging, and the premise for the show is really incredible, which you'll get to hear about in just a moment. The only thing I need to add before we get going is that part of this project Peter has made has been the creation of an album of music, which he has made in collaboration with the Danish Army. It's called Peter and the Danish Defense, and I suggest that you check it out. There are links on the show notes for this episode. It's on all the platforms, including Spotify, so you might as well confess that you've never heard an album made together with a national army before and, mosey on over and listen to that. And as a bonus, after the talk here, we're going to include one of the tracks. It's called Goodbye, My Friend. Stick around and listen to that. It'll be at the end. Peter will also be performing these songs here live in Copenhagen on the 25th and the 31st of August. So check out the links on our page for that too. Go see some music. Okay. We are off now for about 4 weeks, so I encourage you to use the time to check out old episodes of the program or, writing long screeds on social media about this program. We'll hit the ground running again in August. Until then, please have a good summer and enjoy. So, hello and welcome, everybody. This is the first of, hopefully, a series of live podcast recordings here at Overgaden. So, we're excited about that. And thank you for coming out in this horrible weather. Really appreciate it. I know it's hard. And we're here with Peter Voss-Knude and Merete Jankowski, the director of Overgaden and the artist with the show up right now, called Peter and the Danish Defense. And instead of kind of the usual format of asking about your childhood and boo-hoo and why do we do what we do, we're going to talk a little bit more about the show itself.
Sounds great.
And we're just going to start with taking for granted why this show is interesting. To me, it's incredibly interesting because of the fact that defense is such a politicized thing, and it's always kept at an arm's length. The military is in some way untouchable unless you're speaking about it in a newspaper or some sort of public forum, and the people are even less looked at. The only example I can think of is Armadillo, the Danish documentary, which tried to go into a more nuanced look about what the situation is on many different levels. And you had mentioned to me just earlier that you started the project, the project officially started when you received permission from the Danish Defense to work with them, to go on base, to talk to people, etc.
April 14th.
Big day. April 14th.
It was a pretty big day when I received that email because I think it was like, it's going to happen.
Uh-oh. Well, I mean, without that permission, it would be a completely different project.
Sure.
If it would be a project
the project
at all.
is the collaboration.
Right. And you always saw it as a collaboration?
Yes. I try to be as inclusive as I can.
And so you get permission, which I imagine, like you said, is also terrifying. Now what?
Yeah, because it's as you mentioned, it's a pretty complicated field. It's a very touchy subject. It's very sensitive. It's really difficult to understand. It's super urgent. It's difficult. So that's I think why I was like, uh-oh.
It's a minefield. You could potentially cause problems everywhere you look.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel a huge responsibility of not saying fucked up things.
No matter how bad you want to.
I really try not to. I mean, and I will always welcome critique if I do stuff wrong, because I try not to, but I of course can fail, and maybe some parts of this project also are problematic.
I mean, you can discuss that till the cows come home, essentially. But in my mind, it's, as I told you earlier, it's very warm-hearted. So I don't see any of the traditional critique of the military here.
Thank you, I suppose. Yeah. I try to meet people with kindness and curiosity, and this is sort of what I always try.
So what happened when you got that letter? What was the next step?
Oh, what happened? I think I freaked out a little bit. I think I don't remember what I did. I mean, I remember where I sat, actually. Yes, I had a studio at Bakkesensgade. It's because like I think I've had like 10 different studios the last 4 years, because I'd never have money, so I'm like some place, and then I have to leave, and then I go to another place. But I was in this. I subletted a studio, and I was sitting at the desk, and I only remember just that I felt that it was a pretty big deal. It worked. Like, I mean, the how do you travel from an idea to it might come into existence?
Right.
Like, it's a pretty.
Well, I'm thinking also in terms of actually starting the process of going to the base.
Yeah.
You know, because there you are, you show up in a closed area and you go, hi, I'm the artist guy.
Hello, yeah.
Who wants to talk to me?
Exactly. Like, who's that freak alien walking around looking weird and civilian?
Right. So, I mean, what was that like then? Getting issues of trust and
I have so many experiences about that.
Any good examples or anecdotes?
Many. I think. Well, how did I feel when I was? I felt frightened. I felt very vulnerable. I felt really stupid walking around there, and I was lucky that the people I have met down there have been so welcoming and showed me the sort of trust of talking to me. I had specifically a lieutenant who was my sort of contact person. So I was sitting in the administration for the first 3 or 4 times I was down there. I just had really long meetings with him where I asked him a lot of weird questions. I mean, what is war? What is a tank? What do you do? What do you do every day? What is it? I mean, what is it? Right. I don't understand it. Tell him.
Right.
And he has been like such an important co-creator of this project. He's anonymous, and he's I don't want to say his name, but the things we discussed, he made much of all the important decisions. He, for instance, told me that he thought that I should have 3 light towers. That was his way of saying it. He was like, yeah, I think you need 3 light towers to talk to. So that's what I did, because that's what the army told me.
An order.
It wasn't an order, no. No.
But he obviously spent a lot of time and resources working
exactly.
with you.
And he's a photographer, so I was so overwhelmed by the idea of realizing that, well, soldiers and artists, we have stuff in common. Perhaps a lot, actually. Also artistically. Isn't that weird?
Logically, no, but in reality, yes, because we don't hear about soldiers in that way.
No.
One of the things I thought was kind of interesting was that you had worked with Breaking the Silence, which is...
I've not worked for them. No.
Didn't you meet with them, or is there some sort of connection?
They have been my model, my ideal, my inspiration of trying to make substantial activist work.
They're the only example I know of that humanizes soldiers on that level, and it's really heavy stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud to be in the same sentence as them. I mean, very proud.
Yeah, well, it's a huge project in Israel, and it's gotten a lot of attention too.
I think they manage, besides from being really, really clever and sweet people, they manage this really difficult task of making a generous and a productive discussion. I think us activists, we need to find new strategies of doing protests where it's actually there is a optimistic sort of outcome in a way. It's we need to be productive. We can't only be angry, or
against.
We need to be with our anger in a constructive and collaborative fashion, I think. And Breaking the Silence, I think, is like the best symbol of that.
Well, this work doesn't seem very activistic. It seems more investigative. You're more coming in with an open heart and just seeing what is actually going on here.
Yeah, I think it's activism. For me, it's activism.
Personal activism, or
it's insisting on political dialogues. I mean, I was invited into the parliament a couple of months ago to explain about my project. They wanted my input on defense politics.
That's great.
That's pretty activist, I think.
Right, and when you ask questions like, what can art do? There you go.
Exactly.
there's an example.
I'm very up for using art as a super, super literal tool. It's just a tool.
Now, how about the practical aspects? So you start talking to them. Had you already made a deal to have an exhibition? Did you have any idea what was going to come of this?
I didn't know how to make a show, so I asked one of the soldiers to come here and help me.
Here to Overgaden?
Yeah. So he was here. I had a meeting with him a lot of months ago where we discussed ideas. I thought initially I wanted a lot of sandbags, and then he told me, Peter, you don't want to put 200 sandbags in here. You won't want that.
In the middle of summer.
And then he said, why don't you put hand sanitizers here? We had a lot of hand sanitizers in the camp. And so I put hand sanitizer here.
But did you apply, do the traditional route? You wrote an application. Hey, I have this project I'm working on. I would like to show it.
It was one of my friends who suggested that I do it, and then I was like, well, that's not going to happen. Why would they want to work with me? And so I tried to write some thoughts, and then I was lucky to meet and work with this amazing team.
How about you, Merete? When you saw the project come in, were you immediately attracted to it, or were you like, what do we do with this? Or
I was actually immediately attracted to it, but it may sound strange, but I also really, after reading it, I felt a strong urge to meet Peter in person, because I was immediately attracted to the project due to that I did not feel able to sort of pin it down. We get so many applications for, I guess you could say, more traditional art exhibitions. But Peter's project was, as he's saying, it was part activist, part social politics, part pop record, part so many things. And upon reading it, I was, oh my God, how do we make an exhibition out of this? And I very often become inspired by ideas that I can't really wrap my mind around or so on. But I also really had an urge to meet with Peter and somehow try to sense him as a person and feel whether it was a genuine project. Because I'm super interested in that many people, I've been speaking before the exhibition opened, I've been speaking with so many people in the art world who were a bit skeptical about it in the way that they all said to me, well, he must be joking, right? It must be ironic. He can't be serious. I mean, come on. he has to be super. This is the art world. We're all super left wing. We have to be super critical of this military institution, and I think I had a bit of that prejudice myself because it was really important for me that it wasn't some kind of joke project or some kind of so on. So I met with Peter, and I could sense and feel that he was really genuine about that. The project, and then we all became very enthusiastic about it.
Can you talk? I mean, do you have any kind of anecdotes more about the process of doing it? Because I'm also very interested in how it formally became an exhibition. How do you work with this material, which is so endless, and actually formally materialize it?
Yeah,
and you have several different ways of doing that in the show. But before we get to that, a little more about the actual process of meeting these soldiers. What were they? How did they feel about it?
Yeah. Well, it's for me also a little bit endless, so therefore also pretty hardcore to just pinpoint things. But I think what I always try to focus. I try to be sort of disciplined about focusing, and sometimes I think for my own sake, I pin it down saying I write music with an army, and that's basically it. And that's as complicated and as simple as that at the same time. So once you have that conception, then you're like, well, what do I want to write about? Problem. For a long time, for many years, I think 1.5 years, I just met with the guys and focused on making a strong human relation to them. I didn't talk, I didn't film them, I didn't record them, I didn't even take notes while we were talking. I really tried to be present and try to listen. And for a long time, I consciously didn't produce. I was in the state of listening. And so we would sit. For instance, one of the guys came out into a garden house my mom has, and I had my piano out there, and we were just hanging out and smoked a lot of cigarettes. And often we also drink a lot of beer together. And then very sensitive stories appear. Also, sometimes it's not very sensitive. Sometimes it's like very normal stuff we have been talking about. And then my job was to sort of be some sort of I had to sort of take like a snippet, and then if we sit and talk together for like 6 hours, how many words do we say? A lot, I think. I had to like take one of them and try and recognize myself in that feeling, so I can write from it. So the feelings that I think that what my experiment is asking the question: Can I relate? Can I relate to these experiences that I have not had? Can I listen to a story about joy, loss, adrenaline, mania? Can I relate to these things? And if I can write from that, and they feel recognized in what I produce, then some sort of exchange has happened. And this is for me like the essence of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to ask questions about understanding, about language, about how we meet people who are very different from ourselves, but apparently with a big overlap of shared qualities, even though you would think the exact opposite.
Was it always going to be a music album?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know much about your practice, but you are you went to Goldsmiths. You got a visual art degree, I assume, from there.
Yeah, visual art. I don't know.
So where does music? Just art. Does music fit into that as a practice, or is that like a side thing, or where does music come in to a practice as an artist?
Well, I make music. I'm a singer.
You've always made music. It's always been part of it.
Yeah. It's what I did since I was 7 years. I was in a boy choir on big tours when I was a little boy.
Because I mean, it's a non-traditional, exhibition in a space like this.
Yeah,
and I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic document of a project. But it is an alternative way. You're showing drawings. There's some sculptures, and then there's an album of music.
Yep.
And you've performed it as well.
Yeah, we played on Friday. A really wonderful experience.
And what are did the soldiers come into the concert?
One of the soldiers was here 2 hours before the show opened. He came as a surprise and gave me a big hug and said congratulations. And I said, do you want to see the show? And he's like, yeah. That drawing, it's you. I was like, oh my God, it's so big. And he brought one of his soldiers' friends as well. And then we were standing there and talking about their deployment and the color blue. Immediately they noticed about the spray. Oh, this is the spray we used for marking the safe space between a minefield. So immediately the first visitor, even before the show opened, was my target audience. But that means a lot to me.
And can relate to the material. I don't know that color blue. There's spray painted on the floor. It says loyalty in Danish. And now you're telling me that blue actually has meaning. It is a material from...
Yep. It's a material from the army.
But how do you formalize it? Like when deciding to make drawings, for example, what choices did you make to make them this size and what was in them? Is that a personal choice? Is that based off of the material you gathered? Is it...
Why I made the drawings?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm wondering is like how the process of turning the experience of meeting them into physical
the drawings
objects.
came from an ambition to treat drawing similarly as I treat songwriting. So for me, these big panels of drawings, they are also made in a dialogue with the 3 participating soldiers. So I asked them, okay, we're going to have a show now. If I should draw you, what kind of picture do you want me to draw? And then we talk about how a picture changes meaning when it gets into an art space, and that maybe a picture that they would like to see me draw, maybe it's not what they want the public to see about themselves. So always trying to explain them the rules of the art world that they will be sort of subjects in. So for me, the drawing is me trying to do the same as I hope the music is doing. Then there's like a really basic thing for me that the charcoal has like so many connotations, and it is sort of like it's a primitive material. It's very ruthless. It's very quick. It's very expressive. For me, the simplicity of that charcoal stick, it's like a voice or a text. Like it's like some of the very prime areas of sort of where stuff starts. I think that's why I like the charcoal. And I never drew so big before. It was really a fun thing to try. Because you have a body, and one of the faces is like huge.
They are enormous, absolutely. You mentioned you wanted the music to do something, and you wanted the drawings to do the same thing.
Yes.
Can you articulate that a little bit more? What do you want it to do?
I want it to be as a space between me and a person in a uniform. It's that space in between. These things are not fully mine. They're not fully theirs. They are this third thing that we can call music or drawing. They only exist through dialogue. Only. They're only valid. They only have value because of that premise. That I think is like concept. That's the conceptual part, I think, of my work. That's like talking about autonomy of a work, like the black drawing. that's a piece of paper with a lot of charcoal on, but it's also something else because of that premise.
because of the process of making it and the circumstances.
And I try to be as sort of explanatory as I can, telling that to people.
Now, you haven't mentioned any other audience aside from the soldiers. You've been very, very interested in this relationship with the subjects.
Yeah.
But have you thought at all about the greater public?
I write pop music. It's on the radio. It's been played in all of Denmark right now.
Sure.
So I am very humble about taking people's time. I think it's a really big deal, whether that be looking at a drawing or listening to music. So yes, I think a lot about my audience, it's a balance between making something that's accessible, but I don't want to bore anyone. So I hope I'm not too boring.
Don't we all? Well, I mean, you mentioned also in passing earlier when we met ethical concerns.
Yep.
And you were interested in that. And that, of course, is a door that doesn't have to be opened. I don't think it's a necessary thing that you have to address. But what were some of those thoughts you had about ethical concerns about working with the military and privacy, I imagine?
Yeah.
And,
I think that most people would imagine that talking about such sensitive things with people is super problematic. It's super hard. How do I ask? How am I present? What should I not hear? Actually, sometimes I feel like, I think this is too much. Actually, and in situations like that, I have tried to deal with it as best as possible. So, of course, there are a lot of touchy things in this. One of my big concerns was that one of my main protagonists, he was actually also in Armadillo. He was not one of the main characters, but he is in the film. And some of the stuff he said in the film made me really sad. And this is a big motor for me in the project, what he says in that film. Armadillo is a great documentary, and it shows nuances, as you said, that I think are hugely important. But there was a problem afterwards because the soldiers felt exploited. And this is such an important issue. Like, how do we talk with them properly? You don't want to fuck people up, And the specific problem was that there was a scene in which the director hired a stripper and filmed them with in a strip situation before they went on deployment. So it portrayed young, horny men going to war, and this was a setup.
That's very problematic.
I don't want to say it's right or wrong, but it's just saying that this creates a lot of anger and fear from the soldiers, saying like, shit, we can't talk to anyone. I mean, because artists tell stories. So the balance of okay, if I want to engage in this, like, how can I try and almost articulate everything I do to them to prevent, if I have said something wrong, we don't have the song with us. For the first album, I wrote 67 songs, and 11 came on the album. It's been so important to me, trying my really, really, really hardest and best of being, of course, an artist. Of course, I have I have really big ambitions for my work. But what is important? It's the trust and compassion that I share with them. And talking about ethics, I don't want to brag, but one of them told me that he really believed I had a good moral compass for this project. And so that made me really proud.
Yeah, I was going to say, that must have felt amazing. Because then you would have some sort of marker of success for what you were hoping to do.
And it also says something about my flirting with the art world and our funky relationship.
Did the art world hire a stripper for you, or what happened?
No, it says that I am, of course, as vain as everybody else. I need attention, and I want to, of course, be heard as a human being. But I have focused on who do I want to be heard by. And in a way, these guys, it's their validation I have been looking for, primarily. And so that was sort of my safe zone. And then all the rest of this jazz is coming after, and the talk and da. But sometimes I think art would be beneficial if we rested elsewhere, and then infused art with what we were doing in our lives.
You're talking about taking it out of a context that we're so used to.
Art for art's sake, it's not been my thing, I must admit.
Well, that's kind of what I was digging around to with the music too, because music is not one of the fields that has to defend its reason for existing, which creates a space in which you can just make it. You don't have to explain why, and that's part of this multidisciplinary approach, which I really appreciate. Which is like, I made music. Yeah, everyone knows what music is. Everyone knows why music is. No one's like, hey, why do we have music anyways?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And that must bring some freedom to your process as well.
But when people ask me what I do, I say I make music with the army, and then like I don't tell people I'm an artist because it creates boring conversations, like
I do know, yeah. Yeah, in fact, one of the recent conversations I had with an artist, he asked me if I call myself an artist, and I said sometimes because I don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah, but it's pretty hardcore that we can't tell people who we are because we have to deal with it. That is what people think then.
Right, or it's shameful or something.
Do you paint?
Yeah, I painted my apartment last year. It was okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think we should also you had expressed an interest in engaging with an audience and questions
very
and
much.
Stuff. So I kind of wanted to accelerate that process as well.
Please.
I just realized as I started that I had a question for you too, which was about the institutional role in this project, whether you had any concerns on the ethics or presentation or any of the millions of issues that could come up but don't necessarily have to come up. It's just such a touchy subject.
As I said before, after I met Peter for the first time, I think most of my concerns were sort of settled because I could really feel also from talking to Peter that it was a genuine project. And I don't have, as long as we're not breaking the law, I don't really have any problems with us showing things that are controversial or cannot be or aren't liked by everyone. So that was not my primary concern. But I think that it was about a week ago or so, Peter and I sat down together, and I think I said to Peter, so is there anything you haven't told me? Then I would like to know it now.
Good question.
Just in case that we would be bombarded with mails from angry soldiers or whatever. Yeah. Not that I thought Peter had sort of lied to me in any way, but it's actually, with quite a few of the shows that we've done here over the years, it's a question I've asked the artist, because just if there is any subtext or anything that is problematical, ethical, so on, then well, I would just like to know what I should tell the journalists who call me or whatever. So I think Peter and I looked each other in the eyes and say, hey, let's go. This is we both believed in the project, and from then on, I think we were all just happy about it. But
how was the response? How is the response?
Well, I think it's difficult to say because we opened it Friday.
Right. Right.
So we don't really know yet.
Outside.
But I think that at least the attention up so far has been enormous. I mean, Peter was on the cover of Politiken last week, and you've always already gotten a lot of gigs based on the show here and so on. So it's quite good so far.
I think it's pretty good.
And you're going to do concerts on base, right?
On what?
On base for the military. You're going to perform.
Oh, they haven't booked me.
I thought I read that was going to happen.
Well, they are very welcome.
That would be an interesting place to do it.
I'm going to play at the National Gallery Statens Museum 25th of August, and then Code Art Fair, we open the fair at the 31st of August. That's the 2 bookings I have now.
Very cool. Well, I'll be sure to put that up. But let's go back to those questions. Now you backed off. You said you don't want to ask those questions.
Yes, I just don't want to ask myself questions. That's too weird.
Well, what about? I mean, were there any of them that's even just some of the ideas that came out of those questions? Like, what is? I'm generally interested in the public and what are people
There is
wondering.
a question I received that I think is really good, and it's I think on methodology, asking is there a sort of a strategy that you've applied that you feel you could use other places? So this way of inquiry, I think it's a pretty interesting idea in these days where, at least in Denmark, commissions don't work anymore. We don't. If we have a commission, it's being shut down. And you're like, what is that concept? I don't know. Do we need other ways of inquiry? Do we need other ways of talking about some of these super, super, super important and difficult things? And I would love to do a record on the tax commission, or I think there's a lot of sort of institutions where you could jump in and just be curious and talk to people.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Sort of Peter in the tax defense.
I would.
I can see it happening.
That.
Peter in the Taxi.
I will buy that album. You have just sold 1 copy of that future album.
Let's do it.
But I mean, it does speak to also interesting ideas about research in art, which is obviously something the art world has been turning towards.
Yeah.
Very much so. Also the
research-based practice.
Exactly. PhDs in art.
Crazy.
But I mean, do you consider you do consider this research, right? This project.
It's my life. Would you call your life research? Try and exist as who you are?
I don't know about that, but I would say a project is research based or not. I mean, I could go and make a project about the military without ever asking someone about it, as problematic as that might be. That's also a possibility. Stupid. I agree.
But that's what a lot of musicians do. They write songs about the war, and they don't talk to soldiers.
I imagine a lot gets written about soldiers and written, made, shot, etc., without talking to them.
I had a phrase once in my head. How can we ask for a war to end when we don't know what the war is? Seriously, today, what is the conception of war? We have asymmetrical warfare where technology, distance, terrorism, it's a very, very, very difficult field to understand. And I'm like, how can we have soldiers in a war we don't even know the premises of?
Right. How can we win?
How can we win? Exactly. That is actually a really good argument, because I think we also, with training soldiers, we need to train them for not having that how can you explain it? That feeling of success. What is the success criteria for a good soldier? Of course they want to win. I mean, we want to win, but you have to tell them that's not going to happen. You're not going to have that feeling. I think some of these things is we need new stories.
And that's where art can step in, music, etc.
Yeah. That's what we're all trying to do here. And I'm very, very lucky. I feel so privileged that I'm not doing it alone. I have so many amazing people around me to work with, and that I learn every day. I learn, and I feel that's a super, super lucky position to be in.
And hats off to the military for welcoming you in.
Exactly.
As I mentioned earlier, the American military, I'm fairly certain, would tell you to fuck off.
It's that I think I've done my draft, my værnepligt.
You
what is it? Conscription service.
It's the draft. What do you call it? Doing the draft?
Yeah, doing.
You did do it though.
This is
it.
I think I've done enough.
Congratulations, soldier.
One of the guys said that, now you have mud on your shoes. Welcome.
Yeah. That's not inaccurate.
No. My hands are dirty.
Well, it's a military career for you next. I'm sure.
I would like to be a spy, actually, but I think that's not going to happen. I think I talk too much.
A little too open-hearted for that. Well, it did say actually in your statement that you had tried to be a constable in England?
That was my degree show work in London, yeah.
Attempting to become a police officer.
The attempt. My main ambition was that I wanted our entire class to become police officers. That you have this sick concept in London where you become a volunteer police officer who arrest people and you walk around in a uniform, and it's sort of like a volunteer thing, and you do it as a CV thing, like to get jobs.
Fake it till you make it.
And I think that's it was just a really interesting thing that I wanted to understand. So I went through some of the interview processes and was sitting there. But back then, I mean, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I didn't know how to process what I was feeling. I wrote a lot of poems and made some music about it, but it was really fragmented and really, I didn't really know what was going on inside of me.
Well, here's to maturity.
Yeah, old days. Old fart.
Well, should we open it up?
Please.
To some questions?
Please.
I don't know if
anyone has one.
want to chime in here.
Yes.
Okay, so my question, because I have heard a lot about this project for a long time, and I'm really excited to see it, and also very thankful to you that you have shown kind of like the more complexity and nuanced side of the military and soldiers and war and everything. I think that's really great and needed.
Thank you.
But kind of, I was thinking I never got to ask you where it all started, because you've been immediately always kind of so engaged in the details of everything, and it's a big theme. But because I could kind of imagine that if you're like the first response you have to the military is kind of critical. For me at least, or maybe this general kind of left-wing understanding of a military, you would get the attention to like the sexism, the homophobia, and like the violence and so on.
Yeah.
So, but how did it start?
It's a really good question. I think I have to answer that a little bit personally. Because I think it starts with my own fears and my own trying to understand if I can share my experiences with others, or if I am completely alone in the universe. Because I have a lot of lightness in my life, and I also have a lot of darkness in my life, and that's why I am interested in trying to engage in other stories with other people, to see if we can have a sort of shared existence. And so when did that start? I've always felt a weird thing about communities and groups of people. How are you in a group? How are you outside a group? Some people have very strong groups. Some other people are a little bit skeptical towards them, and I have both. I love being alone. I love to go out on a bar alone, but I also loved groups. So I think this exploration with the army, it's a question into grouping. It's a question into social relations. It's a codes talking about masculinity. What am I as a man? Is my way of being a man okay within ideal, very beautiful men? How are the nuances perceived by them, and how many of it is it my own prejudice? All of these studies, all of these questions, all of these fears, I've found a place to ask them, and it's been so lucky that they welcome it. One of the lieutenants said to me, "You just have to be yourself." I think it's a bit crazy to hear that from the army telling you that. I don't know if it was answer. Thank you.
I have a question for Peter, actually, and it was just to rephrase something that Peter and I were talking about the other day, actually, because I came home and I told my wife about the project, and what she immediately asked me was, so what about all the women in the army? Because I've been noticing recently, whenever you see ads from the military wanting people to join the army, it's all women these days. Please notice it, that they really want women to join. And I couldn't really answer her, so Peter and I, we talked about it the other day, and you told me, well, exploring that subject would be a different project, and I was wondering whether perhaps you could elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, that's also a super good question, because it would be natural for me to look at, talking about masculinity, femininity, dynamics of power. Of course, it's been an element always for me. But as I also said before, I am and have been very overwhelmed with information often. Like, I can be overwhelmed with information just by one person telling me stuff. I start to feel all these crazy things, and I try to narrow down my impressions, because I sort of have overload if I have too much that I need to get out as well. So women in the army was sort of a theme that I sort of had to, in my way of focusing on something, I had to not include that, because if I do that in the future, maybe it will be something that I study pretty hard and intense, and have 3 more girls to talk to. But that's 3. There's a really interesting character in the Navy who's a transgender captain
In the Danish Navy.
Yeah, and I'd love to go on that boat.
Yeah, there's a lot to grab onto there in that case. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's great. And he or she is a captain.
I'm not sure what the title actually is, but a high-ranking personnel.
Great, absolutely. Any other questions out there?
I really like the way you frame your art as activism, and especially making it something positive, making it something accessible. I think it's very important, and it's also the way activism should be presented in order to have some effect, I think. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested. So you say that the parliament invited you, or was it? What can you? I don't know if you can say this, but which questions did they ask you? What did they want to know?
Yeah,
I think it's awesome that you spoke with.
Thank you for that question. Of course, I want to share with you those anecdotes, because it is pretty crazy. But first, I really agree with you on the note on activism, because my heart is in activism. My heart is in politics. My heart is in change. My heart is in solidarity. What you often meet with activists is that they drain themselves. How because if you sort of only is angry, or if you only deal with anger, you cannot do that forever, and then you won't have change. So it's such a good point to try our best. One of my friends, I'm so proud of him. He just I don't know. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't tell, but he wrote an amazing article. A debate in Information newspaper about how we deport refugees back to Afghanistan, and there has been some horrible stories where these refugees, that they actually do self-harm on the plane to stop the plane, and you had a horrible story with a razor in a mouth cutting themselves. So now we have Danish doctors on the planes. And this is illegal. It's illegal for a doctor to be present as a force, as a control. That's not a doctor's job. And his way of doing a protest on that, through a really informative article, well written, that helps us all understand this better, I think is the clever, good activism. And so the parliament, I got in contact with a member of parliament. I don't think I should maybe mention his name, but he is the defense warfare. What the fuck is that? spokesperson for a party, and this party is interested in creating new ways. I don't vote for that party even, but we got in contact, and I told him that I was an admirer of the way that he spoke, because he always tries to. He has a really big agenda, which is above politics almost, which is called rhetorics, about how do we talk to each other as politicians. What can we not say? We need a better atmosphere, guys. And he's like, even the one that he's completely opposed to, he says, well, probably I will maybe share many percent of shared with them. Like, so I got in contact with him because of language, basically, and he was interested in the project, and so we met up, and then different things we've done. I was asked to play a concert at a veteran show in church last November. And so the soldier asked me to come and play the songs, did like an acoustic little gig. But what I also did was I came as an artist who know stuff about promotion, about PR. So I helped doing PR for that event to raise the attention on the veteran cause. And what I did with that was to ask the politicians for help. I was like, can you help? I set up a meeting with those two, and then there was written a really big press release from Parliament for the soldiers event. So I try as an artist with my power to put my power where I think it's good. And that said, I think I am all up for art that can actually go in and create decisions. But when I was sitting and discussing some of the things, I also feel that that is another huge responsibility to start and write stuff down that is sort of real. I mean, and I sort of backed out a little bit from some of the meetings because I'd like to take a political science degree before I talk about if women should be forced to do army service. So it was also too much for me.
That raises a question I have, which is about if you ever feel in general that do you ever lose heart about art being the right platform for activism?
No, I think no. I love music and art.
Sure, but as a platform for creating change. You know, some might argue it'd be better to get that political science degree and go into politics.
Now I understand. Yeah. Well, who fixes the status quo? I don't think you do that by going to the university necessarily. And I am not against universities. But we also need people who are outside, do work with different measures and also for different reasons. I mean, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Wrap it up. Last word. Merete, do you have any points? I mean, you've been largely ignored during this.
Oh, I love being ignored for once. No, just perhaps to follow up on what Peter just said. I think something that Peter and I share, perhaps, is a general distrust of irony, and perhaps especially a distrust of irony when it comes to political and social matters. Because tying into what you asked about, Ando, I think a lot of political art is ineffective, truly, due to that it is too concerned with positioning itself within the art world, first and foremost. I'm a great follower of the quote from the British art historian Claire Bishop with what she has named radical chic, that you may want to be radical, but you may want to be chic first and foremost if you want to position yourself first and foremost. So maybe if we actually try to be and actually dare to be more radical than we try to be chic, then I think political art definitely has the potential to change a lot of things.
I think it's a lovely point to end on, the distrust of irony. Maybe I don't even understand irony. Maybe is it autists? I don't understand irony. It's like,
well, there's that fine line too. Sarcasm can be a beautiful thing. but irony can also be a powerful tool of apathy.
If art is the stuff that's the furthest away from the feelings, I don't know what the world is. I mean, come on.
Well, we are. I mean, the art world can be a very cold place.
Yeah, but I think that has different reasons. I think that's because we have so poor or / non-working conditions. It's we are anxious, all of us, and that creates a lot of competition. It creates a lot of bitching because we're broke. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily to do with art as such. That's just money,
reality, survival. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as a good way to wrap it up, it is hats off to you for making a warm, open-hearted project.
Thank you.
I think I've said it 3 times now, but like warm-hearted is the thing I really do get out of this.
I'm so happy. Thank you.
So good job.
Thank you.
And thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for talking to me.
And thank you
for your questions. Thank you.
And thanks for coming, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by Cesus, and of course at the end by Peter and the Danish Defense. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our military art project of a website, undergang.net. If you like this show, we would appreciate it if you take the time to leave a review on iTunes so others can find us. Thank you for joining us.
Goodbye, my friend. I miss you. Goodbye to the times that we'd share. I thank you. 'Cause there are times when I needed you so. You didn't seem to care one bit. Goodbye. I promise myself to hold on, even when you're not around. No, just to say that. Oh, what a horrible sound. I hate you for taking for granted everything we used to be. Myself waiting you all too long. Now finally I'll share with you this sound. I hate you for taking for granted everything we used to be. I love you again. Strange, putting emotions to a song that fits right to me.